All right, in this video I want to talk about failure and rest. And I want to talk about this, maybe not in the sense you're thinking. I actually want to talk about exercise, working out, because it's actually a pretty good metaphor. Failure and rest in exercise teach you about life, right? Because in exercise, you have these 4 basic ways to push your limits, to go to what they would call failure. You can lift heavy weight, where you lift so heavy that you're only able to lift it a few times and then you just can't lift it anymore. You just don't have the strength. You can do time under tension, where you're trying to slowly control a weight and you're exercising with that weight for a longer period of time, where you're not necessarily trying to get more reps, but you're just trying to maintain holding the weight so that there's constant tension on your muscles, right? And you push it when you actually try to go to failure. The same thing with volume, or maybe you're not trying to lift too heavy or hold the weight for a long period of time. You're trying to get as many reps as you possibly can at one time, and then in as many sets as you can in, right? You're trying to get a lot of work on the muscle, that whatever you're trying to work on. And this last one I have here would be stamina endurance. And I put both because I see them as different. I see stamina as your short-term energy and endurance as your long-term energy. And you might be saying, what do you mean? Well, to put it like this, let's say you are going to do sprints and you're all warmed up and you're able to sprint for, let's say, 30 seconds before you can't sprint anymore. You have to slow down or even stop because you're winded, right? You just can't keep going. That is your stamina. I would say that's your short-term energy, how long you can do something before you need rest, right? But endurance I see as your long-term energy, where after you, let's say, rest, let's say you're going to sprint for 30 seconds, rest for 30 seconds, right? And you that's what you're going to do for your exercise. Well, when you're able to sprint for 30 seconds in one session, right there is your stamina. But if you're able to do that after a 30-second rest, well, then you got your endurance is high as well, because you're able to maintain that multiple times. So let's say you're able to do 4 or 6 sets of maintaining a 30-second sprint period, which seems like a long time when you think about it. Imagine just sprinting as fast as you can for 30 seconds. Sounds terrifying thinking about it, right? But imagine you're able to do that like 5-6 times in a row. You got pretty good endurance. But then let's say after 7-8 times, you start to go 25, 20 seconds, maybe even 15 seconds, you're starting to wear down. Well, that would be your endurance, right? You're starting to wear down. And when your endurance goes down, that brings down your short-term endurance as well, right? So anyway, if you push that as well, pushing your heart and lungs, that's when you get results. But there's also what is called rest. When you push yourself to failure, then you rest, and that's where the real growth comes from. You pushing to your limits and failing. The whole goal is to fail and then rest. And then when you rest, you become stronger. The veins open up. They start bringing in the nutrients. They start healing and building up better than before and increasing the lung capacity, increasing the cardiovascular work, helping out the lymph system, pumping out all the garbage, right? You're doing all kinds of different things when you rest, right? And this can apply to life as well. For example, working on your Christian life. You may start to read the scriptures, right? You pray to God, guide me into all truth and comprehension, reveal yourself to me, hide your word in my heart. And then you start, let's say you just read the Psalms or something, right? Something short. But after you read 2 or 3 Psalms, you're kind of just starting to daydream, right? You're starting to lose focus. Well, you kind of pushed yourself to failure, right? You're not able to do much. It's like somebody who's doing push-ups. Sometimes when people just start out, they struggle doing 5 or 10 push-ups at one time. And once they do 5 or 10 push-ups, even if they get like 5 minutes rest, they're not really able to do much more after that. They just don't have it in them. So sometimes that's how it is with people who, when they pray and they read. So what you do is you push yourself to failure. You do as much as you can. And then you rest, right? You hide that word in your heart. Maybe you spend some time thinking about it. But sometimes, it's hard to focus. But you give it rest. And you let that word of God just kind of bury itself in your heart. And it's as you rest that seed is planted in you, starts to germinate and grow over time. But the same thing with exercise, you have to be consistent. So when you go and you work out, whatever kind of strategy you're doing, you're going heavy, time under tension, volume, or you're working on your stamina endurance. If you only do it once, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to be super athletic, it's not going to work. It's the same thing where you're working on your Christian life and you're trying to better know God and you want him to reveal himself to you, but then you only read the Bible once this week and then you didn't even bother reading it for the last couple months. Well, how do you expect any progress? Right? You do the best you can and you push yourself and then you rest and something comes of it. And sometimes it doesn't take much at all. And that's what I've been learning as I get older here. I exercise differently now. Where when I was younger, I was about, I'd say 45 pounds heavier. And it wasn't fat. I was pretty muscular. I would say like a mix, right? I would say I can't remember that word, stocky, right? Kind of stocky at that size. And I would lift heavy, right? But then as I got older, that heavy weight would do a number on my joints, right? I ended up rupturing a groin tendon, getting patella tendonitis in my knee, messing up a rotator cuff in my shoulder. And it was kind of like, I just can't lift like I used to, right? So I stopped doing heavy, and then I would start trying to do volume. And that worked out pretty well, but then it just became too much. Like, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much time in a day, and when you put that much effort and you try to do that much, it's exhausting, right? And then I decided, well, what about doing something like time under tension, but focusing on failure and rest. And now what I do is I'll do like a little bit of something every day, nothing too strenuous. Like every day I might do something with focusing on my grip or focusing on just making sure I get over 10,000 steps, maybe doing a jog or something, right? Riding the bike around. Doing a little bit of something, nothing too strenuous. But only like twice a week do I really do something when I go lift and it's full body, right? And I only do one set of every exercise. But you see, if you're going to do that, you have to push yourself. You have to go to failure. And I was realizing that this also applies spiritually, right? It's not about, I have to study as much as those people like in biblical times where they memorized the whole scriptures, right? I mean, that's a lot of work. I mean, you can have that as a goal, but you do the best you can, right? You push yourself to your limits, and then those limits increase over time, right? But then you got to understand that you may reach a place where it's a plateau. And that's where sometimes you got to change things up. to work on your relationship with God, to get closer to Him, to not get stagnant, to not start to fall backwards. Because when you hit a plateau, you got to figure something else, because if you're not moving forward, you'll start to move backwards, right? So you got to start changing things up. But the main thing is pushing yourself to failure. And that's what I want to talk about here. When it comes to something like exercise, there's different ways you can do it. The same way there's different ways you can do it while praying and reading your word. And this is more of a fitness thing here. But it also applies to your spiritual life, right? So for example here, let's say, we're going to keep things simple here, round numbers the best we can. Let's say you can bench press 200 pounds, right? Well, let's say if you start benching that and you want to bench heavier, you're just going to mess up your joints, right? You're trying to, be healthy and strong, but you're not trying to be in some kind of competition of strength. There's no real practical use of that strength. Well, then you don't want to do that, to risk injury for what? For no real reason or benefit that's going to help you in any way other than bragging rights, right? So you don't want to go ego lift, but you still want to get in shape, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, your joints, your tendons and all that. So you decide you're going to lift lighter. So let's say you lift half of it. You're going to do 100 pounds. But you can do that weight, let's say, 30, 50 times, right? Because it's so much lighter than what you're actually capable of doing. So are you going to sit there and rep that out 50 times, 100 times until you get tired? Kind of like some people, they can do 100 push-ups before they really get tired. But to do that all the time, that takes a lot of focus, especially if you're going to do a total body. That's a hard way to actually get you to failure, right? So how are you actually going to do that? Well, the thing is that you do it in multiple ways. One is with patience. With patience, you push your limits. And how you do that patiently is you keep track. This is the first thing, the easiest thing to do, because it's hard to actually push yourself to that kind of limit, right? So how you do that is, let's say, deep down you could really lift that weight up 50 times, right? But around 30 times, you're starting to get mentally fatigued, and it's starting to get a little sore, and you don't want to fight for that extra 20 reps, so you kind of stop around 30, 35 reps. Well, what you do is you mark that down. All right, I did 35 reps, and I'm not going to do this again until next week, right? So let's say on Monday, you bench, you did that. You did 30 reps. You mark that down, you keep track. So maybe you didn't push to failure. Maybe you could have pushed a lot further, but you keep track. So the next week, what do? You try to beat what you did last time. So right there's the easiest way. You patiently push your limits. So if last time you only pushed to 30 reps, this time try to at least get 31. But, try to do obviously more than that. And you start competing with yourself. It starts to become a little game. So you did 30. This next time you push and you do 35. All right? And then every week you're starting to push a little bit more. Eventually you get to the point where you're actually truly pushing yourself to failure. Even though it may take a month before you're actually truly pushing yourself to that point where you're reaching your max, you patiently get to that point. Because it's hard. Especially you're by yourself. To really push yourself to your limits, it takes a lot of mental focus and effort to do that. Right? Especially with some exercises where you could potentially drop the weight, hurt yourself, or break something, right? So you patiently work your way up to that, all right? You do a bit more, and that's the thing, the rest. You're giving plenty of rest. And that's another thing, what I notice when I rest, and let's say I do an exercise once a week, I actually want to go do it again. Like, I'm like, I didn't push myself hard enough. I think I can do better. And then by the time next week comes around, I'm ready to do more than I did last time. And you see, if you take that to the way you pray and you read, when you come to the scriptures, you're like, I only read a chapter, but I'm not going to read again until tomorrow, right? Let's say because you're busy, whatever it is. And you'd be like, you know what, tomorrow, I don't think a chapter was enough. I mean, that's pretty lazy. I want to focus. I'm going to read 2 chapters. And then maybe you end up reading 3, right? You start challenging yourself to get into this more. And it's the patient way is right there. I would say that's the first and easiest way to go about things. This next one here is where you do the time under tension thing, like I was saying, the tut here. So in this case, let's say you're able to actually, like I said, you're able to lift that weight 50 times, which would be a lot of times, right? A lot of reps. But you don't want to sit there and do that many reps. Well, you see what you do is you do it slowly, especially lowering the weight. You push it up at a normal pace or even fast, but you lower it really slow. And what you notice when you start to lower it slow, it starts to really wear you down, and that weight starts to feel a lot heavier than it is, right? And then let's say you're only able to get 15, 20 reps because you're going slow. It feels so much heavier. But you have that mindset of, I can lift this 50 times, and it kind of pushes you to lift it more and fight more because you're like, no, I can do this 50 times. But when you do it so slow, you notice it really takes the fight out of you. So let's say you're only able to get 20, but you really push this time because your ego, your mind is like, I can do more, right? And sometimes that's how it is when you read. Sometimes you're like, I'm going to read a chapter, but you don't actually finish the chapter because you're too busy focusing on the paragraphs, the verses, and you're talking to God about them, and you're unfolding them, where you're spending more time on the passages. So you never actually fully read the chapter when you know you read a chapter every day, right? Or every morning, right? You get into it, you spend time under tension, time thinking about it, has just as much value, if not more value, than getting a lot more in, right? Like getting volume, right? And that's another thing that happens here, right? Is sometimes even when you push and you do time under tension, you're only able to do 20, and you still want to push more. There's that third step where it's called drop set, right? So let's say, like I was saying, you're bench pressing 100 pounds and you're going slow, and you're only able to do 20 reps. Well, then let's say you drop it to 75 pounds. And then you do it again. In that 75 pounds, let's say you're only able to get 10, 15 reps. It's lighter, but you've already exhausted yourself. And then you drop it down to 50 pounds. And that feels heavier than 50 pounds because your body's already exhausted. And then you can mix this in what is called rest pause, where you do your reps, you pause, you let it sit there on the rack, you catch your breath, and you do it again. And then that weight feels a lot heavier because you didn't give yourself any rest. And by doing these things, you can do one set of the exercise and really push yourself where you only have to do it once a week, and you'll actually get benefits in your strength and your stamina and your physique. And you can apply this again to your study, where, say you read a chapter, right? But now you're going to do a drop set. You read that chapter, but now you're going to focus on the first half of the chapter, right? So you kind of lowered how much you're going over, but you're going over that same chapter, but only a small portion of it. And then you're going to go over the first quarter of it. Let's say it's made the chapter's 4 paragraphs. You read the 4 paragraphs, then you go over the first 2 again, then you go over the first one again, just to really get it into your mind. And then the next day, you'll read the whole chapter, and then you'll focus on the last 2 paragraphs, and then the last paragraph. And you keep going over it in different ways, and it opens up in different ways to you, right? And then sometimes, like the rest pause, right? You read a paragraph, you take a time and you think about it. And sometimes you just clear your mind, kind of get the preconceived ideas out of your head. And then you read the next paragraph, and you pause and take a breath there, and then you go to the next one. You can still apply these things. It sounds kind of weird, but you'll be surprised the effect it has. Like when you're just reading something through, sometimes you just end up skipping over things. You don't even realize it. Or you start to daydream. You start to focus on other things. And you're just like, man, how much did I miss and overlook? So if you apply these different things, it will actually affect your spiritual life as well. And it shows where failure is good, right? You push yourself to your limits, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter if you're able to read the whole Bible in one sitting. Even if you're able to do that, whoop-de-doo, right? You're very spiritually fit, I guess, right? If that's how you want to look at it. Just like if you're able to do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 sit-ups, 100 pull-ups, and then run 2 miles in 12 minutes all at one go, you're pretty physically fit, right? But what of it? You're physically fit. Good for you. That's good, right? But, not that I'm making fun of that sort of thing. That shouldn't be goals, right? That you shouldn't strive for. The point is you shouldn't look at it as, well, I can't do all that, so I shouldn't do it at all, right? That shouldn't be your mindset. And this applies to other things in life. When you go and you are basically a plant for God, where He's trying to have you grow and be fruitful, and He's going to prune things off. Every time He's pruning something off, it's kind of like you started growing a branch into an area where there's no sun, right? And then it's not able to get the nutrients. You started growing in a direction that you shouldn't have been growing. It's not able to get nutrients for whatever reason. And it's not producing any fruit when that branch that you started sprouting. And then you start to feel like a failure, right? Well, you can learn from that. All the effort and everything you put into that, and then you failed. Like, let's say it's your biggest, strongest branch on you, and it doesn't produce any fruit. And it starts to wither up a little bit, but you're still trying to get something out of it. But eventually God comes over and He prunes you and He cuts it off. And it's like, no, you're so sad and broken and hurt. But then all that energy you were putting into it now starts to be redistributed to the rest of you. And then there's massive growth in areas where now you're going to bring forth fruit. So you see, there was a big failure. You were pushed to that point of failure where you failed. And that helps you to let go, rely on God, and rest. And in that rest, God produces the growth and the fruit. Where Paul talks about there's one that plants, another watereth, but God gives the increase, right? It's kind of a showing about how you do a little bit of work. Somebody goes and does planting, and then they go rest. Somebody else comes over, they water, they go rest. And then God does the actual work of bringing forth the plant and bringing forth the fruit. All right? So it's about working smarter, not harder. All right? And getting the most out of what little you put in. Well, there's actually a lot of benefits into just pushing yourself. And again, you can go about it patiently and not push yourself extremely hard, but consistently try to compete with yourself brings forth benefits when you mix it with rest. Because a lot of times what I've noticed is when I was younger and I was lifting heavier and I was lifting more frequently because I was able to handle it, you start to get into, the young stupid mindset of like, I'm just going to push harder and further. And you end up not messing up a lot of things because you don't realize how the exercise messes up not just like your muscles, but it has an effect on your joints, your ligaments, your tendons, and your nervous system, where it starts to break you down in a mental way, in a psychological way, where you're beat and it breaks your will, where you just don't want to go do it anymore. Like it takes the fight out of you. And sometimes that can take the fight out of you for like months before you actually get that desire to want to actually go lift again. And then before you can even enjoy going to do it again. Because your body has just been so wiped out because you just pushed too hard, too far, for too long. And you got to mix the failure with the rest, right? Because once you start to see some success, you think, oh, I want to go do it more. You start to get into a rhythm and start competing with yourself. And sometimes you can keep doing it pretty regularly. You can push the volume, do things more often, right? But then you start to wear out, right? So it's good to be patient with it and do, like I'm saying, I only do one exercise per group. So I'll do a pushing exercise, a pulling exercise, and a leg exercise. But I'll push it as far as I can for one set. I used to do 2 sets just because I wasn't sure if I was pushing myself hard enough. But that was taking more time and taking a lot of strength. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on beating myself each time. So I just do 1 set, and I do that set as far as I can. And I'll do these different things, right? I'll do a set number that I want to do. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll focus on negatives, where I'll push the weight up fast and slowly bring it down, sometimes holding it. And then when I'm starting to get tired, I'll do partials. I'll do partial reps. And then I'll rest for just like a few breaths and do it again so it feels hard, like it's super heavy, where let's say you're able to do 20 reps of something, and then when you rest for a few seconds and you go to do it, all of a sudden you can only do 1 or 2. All of a sudden it feels like it's twice as heavy as it was just 3 seconds ago, right? And that puts not only works out your body, but it works out your mental toughness, right? And it's less stress on your actual body because it's not actually heavier weight, but to the muscles, because of its exhausted state, it's as if it is heavier. So you end up doing the benefits of lifting heavy without actually lifting as heavy. So you focus on time under tension, rest, pause, and then do a drop set where you're still not giving yourself much rest, just enough rest to lower the weight a little bit, and then do it again. And you just do that. And I noticed not just improvement with strength, but with just I can't even say the word. Just overall well-being, where I keep the mental alertness, the mental energy, the desire to go and do it again, and the joints and the tendons and everything feel good, and even are recovering the injuries that I've had. And I was realizing, I should share this with people, but also show how it can be used in your spiritual life. And I would talk about it a bit more, but I just realized I'm at 1%. I think you get the point anyway. But, push yourself when you're going to do something, push yourself. My dad always told me, if you're going to do something, do it right. Put your whole heart into it. If you're going to half-ass it, don't do it at all. Right? So he was like, I'd rather you just not do it if you're just going to not actually put your heart into it, to actually really do it. So if you're going to do that, put your effort into it and then rest. Right? If you realize you hate doing squats, you hate going for a jog, Well, if you tell yourself, well, I only have to do this one time this whole week and I can rest for the rest of the week, and I just push myself as far as I can go today, it's a lot easier. You can tell your body, you know what, yeah, this is all I got to do is push as hard as I can right now, today, and then I get the rest of the week off from doing this. You can psych yourself up, and it makes it so much easier to go do it. Instead of telling yourself, oh, I'm going to have to do this weight, and I have to lift it 10 times, but I have to do that 4 times, and then I have to do that 2 or 3 times this week. And then that can start to beat you down. And it's the same thing with you doing your Bible studies and your Bible reading. You know, not everybody likes reading these days, so it's a lot tougher, it's a lot harder. So you got to do it in increments, the best you can. And if you tell yourself, okay, I only need to do this week, I'm going to read 4 chapters today, but that's all I got to do for the week, you can actually get yourself to focus. And as you keep doing that, you'll start to want to read more and more and more. But you got to push yourself, even if you can only bring yourself to read a chapter. Just do it. Sit there and read a chapter and push yourself. But this is going to die at any second, so thank you so much for watching. I hope I helped you in some way. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share the video, share the channel, interact in the comment section. These things help out a lot. Don't forget to do what Isaiah said and find the book of the Lord and read it and do what he said along with Paul and study that word, comparing scriptures to scriptures, so that you may show yourself approved unto God, rightly dividing the word of truth, and do what John said and hide that word in your hearts and keep it so that God will keep you from the hour of temptation that will come upon the whole world, and that Jesus will never tell you do err not knowing the scriptures. And if you want to help out with some more, please go to the info description box. There's 4 ways you can donate to the ministry if you so choose. And don't forget to pray that God helps us all out. Thank you for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.